1 year ago, Najib Razak took over as Prime Minister here in Malaysia. Now he's announced a new economic model, saying he'll reduce the preferential treatment currently given to the majority Malays at the expense of the minority Indian and Chinese communities. It's a bold move aimed at attracting much-needed foreign investment and winning back disgruntled voters. I'm Fauzia Ibrahim. On this edition of 101 East, we speak with Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak about the challenges facing his nation. Many Malaysians consider Prime Minister Najib Abdul Razak political blue blood. He is the son of the nation's second Prime Minister and the nephew of the third, so it seems only fitting that he took over the reins at a time of national political uncertainty.
Saya Muhammad Najib bin Tun Najib Razak dengan sesungguhnya bersumpah bahawa saya tidak akan
In March 2008, the ruling coalition, Barisan Nasional, was left reeling from major election losses. The dominant party, the United Malays National Organisation, or UMNO, in particular, lost ground to opposition groups. 1 year later, party leader, then Prime Minister Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, resigned, paving the way for his deputy, Najib Razak, to take over. The new Prime Minister promised to address the grievances of minority groups, many of whom chose to support the opposition in the polls. One major issue that's often threatened national unity here is the national economic policy. Implemented in 1971, the affirmative action policy gave majority Malays preferential access to higher education, new housing development, civil service jobs and business opportunities. But after nearly 4 decades, many have questioned the effectiveness of the scheme. Now, Prime Minister Najib is seeking to correct the general perception that the policy has led to a sense of entitlement amongst the Malays.
For too long, the implementation of our affirmative action policies have not reached those who needed them the most. We can no longer tolerate practices that support the behavior of rent-seeking and patronage. So, there will be renewed affirmative action policy in a new economic model with a focus on raising income levels of all disadvantaged groups. It will focus on the needs of our people.
The Prime Minister promises the NEM, as it is popularly known, will be inclusive and beneficial to all Malaysians. It's all part of his One Malaysia concept, an effort to erase long-standing ethnic lines and build trust and respect. But he is facing opposition from Malay groups who fear they will be robbed of their special privileges, as stated in the Constitution.
The government should not be carried away by this present political scenario. Whatever the government want to do, as far as if it's good for the country, go ahead. But don't forget, the Malays and indigenous people who command the majority population of this country are still being marginalized and still backward. If the majority is not happy, in the future you cannot guarantee the national unity.
Many agree that addressing the nation's social and economic imbalance puts Prime Minister Najib and his political party in a difficult position.
For the ruling party, he has to walk a tightrope on this issue. He has also to bring to bear its economic policy on the normalists, while at the same time retaining its earlier role, its traditional role of championing the cause of the Malays.
Prime Minister Najib's first year in office has been tested by rising racial and religious tensions. In November last year, activists protested what they claim was the government's use of the Internal Security Act to silence opposing voices. But Malay groups defended the act, saying it was needed to keep in line anyone questioning the Constitution's statement of special privileges for the majority Malays. The government calmed both sides by promising to set up a committee to review the ISA. And in January this year, Malay Muslim groups were up in arms over a Catholic church's use of the word Allah in their texts. The Prime Minister was once again tested over the issue of Malay superiority and dominance. He condemned the attacks against churches and appealed for calm. But the events have thrown doubts as to whether Prime Minister Najib is able to address his people's deep-seated grievances.
This can only be shown in the next election. But for one thing, I can assure that if there is going to be an expanding economic cake, which allows everybody, Malays and non-Malays, to benefit out of it, then probably he is on a safer course.
Until then, Prime Minister Najib will have to continue walking a fine line in an effort to unite his divisive nation. Joining us now on 101 East is Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak. Sir, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
In your outline for the new economic model, you emphasize inclusiveness in the plan for all races. But you've also kept the affirmative action for the Bumiputras, which is made up of about 53% of Malays and 12% of the indigenous people. But then you've also said the affirmative action in your plan is different to the ones from previous. What's so different about it?
It's different because we've learned from implementing the affirmative action in the past. We know where the weaknesses are.
Well, what are the weaknesses?
Well, I think basically, we have to change the way we implement it so that it is more attuned with the current market, especially the market expectations that it should be market friendly. It should be based on merit. It should be more transparent. And it should also be on needs basis. And I've emphasized that we have to be fair. When we implement affirmative action, it means for the Bumiputra. And when we say Bumiputra, it's not just for the Malays. It must also include the other indigenous people, especially in Sabah and Sarawak.
Well, there has been criticism that the way it's been implemented has been corrupted, has been abused in the past. Would you agree with that?
There have been shortcomings, yes. I'm not entirely disappointed with the results. I think if you look at it across the board, I mean, a new generation of Bumiputras have emerged. The entire middle class, for example, would not be there if not for the new economic policy, and quite a number of Bumiputras in the corporate field managing huge enterprises with a great sense of confidence now.
There is no doubt that some Bumiputras have definitely benefited from the plan itself. But, there are some who sort of say, after nearly 40 years of affirmative action, why is there still a need for affirmative action for the Malays and the indigenous people?
It's because, the goals have not been fully achieved, number one. Number two, in an unbridled capitalistic market economy, without some degree of affirmative action, then you will get this marginalization to appear once again. And that's going to be quite catastrophic for our society, because our society is predicated on stability. I think stability is a bedrock in terms of where Malaysia has come from in the past. We went through a very painful experience. Stability? I'm talking about political and racial. I mean, racial stability is part of political stability. And that's so important, because if you have stability, it benefits all.
Many people have said that the affirmative action has led to a generation of Malays who feel that they are entitled to these special privileges. There are some minority groups who feel sidelined. They feel second class because of the affirmative action. These are what the critics are saying about the affirmative action. Do you really think that there is still a need for affirmative action? Why not just make it, affirmative action for all races?
Well, when I said that it should be implemented in a fairer